Ask Reddit.
Hunters of Reddit, what did you see out there that made you not want to go back into the woods? My father and I were following a trail for a while, so we decided to take a break and catch our breaths. I sat on a log off the trail and my dad stood on the edge of the trail waiting for me to get up. I hear some movement and scan around, and I see a man, dressed casually, walking quickly down the trail with a Glock in his hand. He is not really following the trail, he is just walking toward my dad with haste. Before he comes up to my dad, he asks if he's seen anything. Pretty normal. I keep an eye on him, because I don't believe he was there to hunt. I think he was there to make sure my dad hadn't seen anything he wasn't supposed to. He wasn't dressed like a hunter. He didn't walk like a hunter. And it was deer season and he decided he would take his Glock out to get a deer. I wasn't buying, so I put a round in the chamber and watched them talk. He seemed to be confident until my dad mentioned that he was here with me and gestured in my direction. I nodded and made a half-assed wave, and he seemed to lose interest in us and ended the conversation shortly after and turned around and walked back the way he came, just about as fast as he walked up to us. It worried us a bit, but we continued on. We haven't been back to that area in a while. My dad told me that there have been drug busts near that area in the past. This isn't a supernatural tale, just an experience that made me not want to go back to that area. A long time ago my grandparents bought a small cabin in the woods in Pennsylvania. My dad, uncle, and aunt are all small children. My father told me this story. They're all sitting around outside with a small fire going when they hear branches breaking and footsteps coming from the darkness. They think it's a black bear because it's close, but they can't see it. It seems to be going straight for my uncle, the littlest of the children. He starts panicking while everyone tells him not to move. Now this big black beast is within arm's reach of him, and he's shaking like a leaf with his eyes closed. All of a sudden it opens its jaws and starts licking his face. Turns out that the next property over is owned by a couple who raise Newfoundland dogs and one got out. I work in the woods for a living and I've seen a fair amount of odd things. Carvings in trees, old beat up cars, random weird trash scattered through the woods, and a fair amount of animal carcasses. I've had instances where I've gotten spooked. Stuff like jumping big critters is always quite jolting, but I can recall one rather butt-puckering experience. I was working with a few other people at the time, spaced out of sight, but not out of earshot. I crossed over a little ridge at least 2 miles from the closest road, in the middle of the woods, and I saw what looked like a full skeleton of a cow tied together with twigs and a little bit of twine. Whoever made it had fashioned it to be sitting on a log. They left a very neat pile of bones in front of the thing, and nothing anywhere else. I saw it and about fainted. Definitely really f***ing odd considering how far we were off the road and how thick and steep it was. I ended up getting the folks I was with to come check it out, really just for shits and giggles. I took note of it, and we moved on to the next plots. I have a picture, but I'm new to this whole Reddit thing, so I'll try to figure out how to upload it. There is a place in Kingston, Idaho or the other side of Fern and Saddle depending on which way you go to get there. I call it the Snake Pit, and no I don't mean the restaurant. I still visit the area now once in a while and camp there. Anyways, next to where I camp in the trees is a basin, and it has a bunch of old 1920s 1930s rotted cars in it, overgrown by bushes and trees, but sunlight falls on the cars. First time I camped out there I walked into those woods and the leaves all started to move. The snakes were running from me while they were sunbathing on the cars. Fucking creep me out. I don't go in there forward anymore, and I don't see the snakes leave that spot, so I just let them be. My family owns a couple hundred acres of forest in eastern NC. No one lives on the property anymore, and hasn't for the last 6 or 7 years. We went down there to do some target shooting in October of 2017, and I decided to go walk through the outskirts of the woods to locate a good limb for our range marker. As I'm walking, literally and proverbially kicking rocks, I come across a fairly nice, but practically brand new looking suitcase, full of clothes and other personal effects. No ID, nothing with any sort of identifying markers on them, but seemed to be clothes for 4 people, 2 kids and 2 adults, 1 male and 1 female. Had some food, coloring books, etc. There was a makeshift lean-to about 100 yards farther into the woods. set up a trail camera, and left it there for 3 weeks. Never saw anyone. When I went hunting with my dad one time, we saw a homeless looking guy carrying what looked like a torn cloth and a screwdriver on one of the trail cams. This cam was pretty deep into the woods, and it was no one we knew, so we were pretty creeped out to go back out there. I don't like to jump to conclusions, but that man was obviously going to tie someone up and stab them. Hopefully he was just doing some man vs wild type of hunting on humans. I was being watched on the woods. It was the strangest feeling. I got paranoid enough that I began walking all the way to where I knew a park warden was parked. After about 100 meters, I turn around to make sure I wasn't being followed, and I see 3 bears smacking my stuff around. One bear was standing up in the middle of the access road staring right at me. Camping alone in the middle of Missouri the night before turkey hunting. The place I found was a fairly well used campsite, but no one was there. About to go to sleep when I hear a truck come up. I find a reason to come out, use the restroom, so I can get a look and maybe even ask for some good places to spot turkey. It's a dude and his girlfriend drinking beers and going for a ride. They are super nice, but they mentioned after our chat and before leaving, watch yourself out here. Lots of meth heads and they won't stop for birdshot. Want a slug? I probably have a few in my toolkit. I did not sleep at all that night. As soon as your story started, I thought it was going to be meth heads, as I live in Missouri myself. Pleasantly surprised that meth was still involved somewhat, so I wasn't completely wrong. I missed this trip with my dad and his hunting buddy. They were in a remote section of southeastern Wyoming hunting for elk. Like any good elk hunter, they were up at 3:30 to stake out their spot and watch the herd patterns before daylight. As they were driving up to the spot, a figure appeared in their headlights, and by their silhouette, it wasn't a hunter. What was a person doing walking down the road in complete darkness with no hunting gear? My dad was driving, so he slowed to a crawl in his truck, and his buddy prepared his sidearm, as this had foul play written all over it. When they could distinguish the figure in the headlights, they saw it was a girl in a tank top and underwear, wearing no shoes on. They stopped and verbally checked her status out the window, as there could have easily been somebody staked out in the sagebrush, ready to ambush. When it was clear she was severely hypothermic and bleeding from her feet, they got out and let her in the truck cab. From there, it had to have been a terrifying experience for that girl. I sure wouldn't want 2 middle-aged rednecks picking me up 40 miles from any town. They cranked up the heat full blast and drove her to a nearby country gas station, where they were regular customers and friends with the owner and his wife, who was a retired nurse. When the girl could finally articulate her words, she told them that she and her boyfriend drove out there to drink and have sex. When she started having a seizure during sex, he lost his temper, grabbed her shoes, and threw them into the sage. When she got out of the car to find them, he peeled off, leaving her in near freezing temperatures in her skivvies. She estimated she walked about 4 miles on a dirt road before my dad found her. It's a good thing hunters start early, because she easily could have died. I've got one good one. I have a hunting spot that I frequent. Not crazy far off the grid or anything like that. Terrain is a pain in the ass, but it's a pretty hidden spot that is close to my house. Anyway, I hunt a lot of small game there and see a ton of mule deer anytime I go out. One morning I get there about 5:30 am and have some time to kill before I start my hiking. I have an odd feeling in the parking lot, but just chalk it up to too much coffee on an empty stomach giving me anxiety. So, I decide to start hiking in, and about 300 yards into my hike I notice this pile of downed trees / branches / general debris that I hadn't seen before. It was my first time hunting this particular place this particular season, so I figure some folks came out and did some fire mitigation work. I don't pay too much attention to it until I notice there's an odd amount of movement coming from it. Pretty small movements, but it sticks out when a brush pile is wiggling on a still day. It was also about 5:45 am, and the wilderness just sort of has this stillness to it at that time that any movement is noticeable. So, I stop and start examining the pile to figure out what's going on. I figure there's a rabbit in there, maybe some squirrels. I figure I've hit the jackpot, and I'm definitely about to bag something. I start deciding the best way to flush whatever is going on in there and still have my shotgun up in time to take a good shot. I realize I'm standing by a decent sized branch, and my best move is to just stomp on the branch. If all goes according to plan, everything will freeze, then whatever is in there will dart out. I try to figure out where the rabbit will come out of, get ready, and bam, I stomp on the branch and snap it in half. The pile goes still, and that stillness and quiet is back. Then, a mountain lion, with a bloody nose and mouth, pops up out of the pile. At this point, I'm about 10 yards from the pile. I have my shotgun, but really don't want to shoot the lion. I also don't want to fire a shot off in the air to scare it, because all in all this was a pretty cool experience that very few people get to have. It froze and was looking at me very quizzically. Then, in one quick motion it hopped out of the brush pile, ran uphill, got about 40 yards from me, and disappeared into the trees. I've never seen something cover 40 yards uphill in such a fast, graceful way. One of the cooler things I've ever gotten to experience. I went to check out the brush pile when it left, and sure enough it was feasting on a mule deer. Still my favorite out in the woods story I ever tell.